Alright guys, it's a win and in round here. Round 4, both our feature match players are on 2 wins, so the winner makes the top 8, the loser likely does not. On the left, it's Brett Rose. Seems to only show up for the championships, but that's a good week to show up. He won the February event with this Boros burn deck, and his opponent is George Arbogast, who's on the exact same archetype. Now, the decks are built slightly different, as Brett's deck is playing Young Pyromancer, and George's deck does not. I think George's deck is similar to the Brad Nelson build, where I think Brett's deck is a little bit more of his own homebrew. So for those of you just joining us, as we see a Boros record here, one of the more important cards in the format, though Brett does have a Chain to the Rocks that's going to answer that pretty quickly. Assuming he has a mountain, that is. There is a Young Pyromancer and just a pass back. So Brett, without a mountain, going to come back to what's likely going to cost him here. So Searing Blood on the Young Pyromancer. So Brett going to go down to 14 in total. George shocking himself, likely because of a Magma Jet or Lightning Strike that's inbound. Brett draws a Chanter's Phoenix, but he can't cast it. There's another Young Pyromancer. End of turn Magma Jet from George. One on top and one on bottom. George with 2 Reckoners, one of the more important cards in this mirror. We know Brett has an answer to 1, but he still needs to find a mountain to be able to cast it. Pretty brutal to be short a mountain, and he draws another temple. It's not going to do him any good here at all. So George moving at his usual breakneck pace for no apparent reason. Knocking Brett down to 5. There's a Boros Charm down to 1, and then finish him off with the Magma Jet. So Brett's draw, not nearly, So welcome to all of those joining us from the Magic Online Championship coverage and Star City Invitational. So into game 2, Brett on the play. He dropped game 1, partly due because he could never find a mountain to use to chain Boros Reckoners to the rocks. But on the play, very important in this matchup, and there is a Satyr Fire Dance. It'd be interesting to see if George burns it, because there's really no point to doing that. There is an Ash Zealot, so I stand corrected. George's deck does have non-Phoenix and non-Reckoner creatures in it. Now that Fire Dancer looks amazing, because it's going to 2-for-1 George pretty hard here, I'd imagine. 3 mana for a Peak Eruption. Blowing up the mountain, do the 3 damage to him, redirect with Satyr Fire Dancer. Get you some. Good grief, Brett. That's illegal in 6 states. And there's a shock on the Fire Dancer, which I don't really like out of George. He's not going to win this game by shocking the 1/1 creatures. But after seeing the Peak Eruption basically wreck him, I think may have overreacted a little bit to that, but still pretty exciting play there. George stuck on 1 mana. These decks can survive on 2, but 1 is pretty light. So we now know Brett sides into Peak Eruptions here. Pretty darn good. Stone Rain, deal 3. And there's a replacement Satyr Fire Dancer. Four mana for a War Leader's Helix. Another important card in this matchup, as it changes the tempo drastically. But George lost this game when he missed on that when he missed on that 3rd land after the Peak Eruption. going to be almost impossible for Brett to lose from this position. Serve in for 1. Pass back. There's another Scrylands. See, that's the problem with these decks too, is they play these Scrylands. And the aggressive red decks are not one that usually want to play Guild Gates. Then George again burning the Fire Dancer. Both cards on top, passes back. There's a Helix. It's almost entirely impossible for Brett to not have a 3 damage card in his hand. So Brett riding what is early contender for highlight of the week, using a Peak Eruption to totally destroy George's hopes. And alright, so here's the decider. George on the play here. He's on a mold of 6. He's trying to ride that advantage to a win here and make it to the top 8. Just passes back. We see his hand. There's at least 1 Boros Charm, maybe 2. And there is a Blind Obedience. Blind Obedience shutting off, and there is the Boros Charm. Blind Obedience shutting off the haste from Ash Zealot and Chandra's Phoenix, and allowing Brett to get some incremental life gain here. And there we see it effectively save him 2 life. Let's see if he has a Chain to the Rocks to be able to extort and answer the Phoenix here. 3 mana for a Chandra's Phoenix of his own, and just decides to attack in. George on a land-heavy draw here. Scries 1 to the bottom here. Looks like another Boros Charm is up. Just think about shocking that Phoenix. I think you just point all of your burn at Brett's head. Ash Zealot comes in tapped, and then swings in with the Phoenix. These mono red mirrors are always pretty tense. It feels like I'm on at any point the powder keg can erupt. So Brett's serving in, knocking George down to 16. There's a Magma Jet on the Ash Zealot. Going to go ahead and extort. Yep. Hey, you scratch. Gotta resolve all parts of the spell. It is not an option. So scrying 2 to the bottom. Pretty important there. It'll be interesting to see how Blind Obedience interacts here. And then George choosing to shock the Chandra's Phoenix. Just passes the turn back here. Brett with the War Leader's Helix in his hand. That's effectively, with an extort, going to be a 5-point life swing. Not sure it's going to be possible for George to beat that tempo loss. Down to 11, Brett up to 18. And again, we know that George had to mold a 5 on the play, so in this... Well, I didn't discount for the Blind Obedience trigger on George, so he's down to 10 here. There's an Ash Zealot, comes into play tapped. Activate my Mutavault, serve in for 4. Knocks Brett down to 14. I had missed that Mutavault. But there's another War Leader's Helix in Brett's hand. There's another Chandra's Phoenix, but we're not extorting here, knocking George down to 8. Now this is pretty dangerous here from Brett here. Goes down to 4, or goes down to 10, I should say. Oh, for some reason I thought Brett was at 10. Whatever. There's a Magma Jet with extort. And we know that War Leader's Helix in Brett's hand is going to be good enough. So it looks like Brett, with his white cards, is going to steal this mirror. Well, not steal it, I should say, but just win it outright. So go ahead and cast that Helix. It's going to be good enough. Just do it, please, Brett. No slow roll, poor George here. There's the shock. George tapped out. Am I missing? Does he not have a Helix? There's the Helix with Extort for the win. So Brett gets it done there. Two Boros burn decks built very differently. And we see in the mirror, Brett set up has a superior setup. Blind Obedience basically winning him the game there, and then drawing both of his War Leader's Helix. Super important. Alright, so there's a little change of pace. I'm going to step outside and see if we've got any other matches we can move over, so stay tuned.